Hello Year 5 and welcome to your first reading skills lesson this week. The text we're looking at for the whole week is the Mayan creation story. You can find the text in the Files tab on our Teams page if you would like your own copy. Also the questions and all the answers are there as well if you'd rather open them up as a PDF, but they are on the video if you need them. So I'm going to start the lesson today by reading the text to you and explaining all the meaning of the tricky words. So we're going to be looking at the vocabulary, and then your questions are based on retrieval questions about the text. Let's just remind ourselves what VIPERS stands for. V for vocabulary, I for inference, P for predict, E for explain, R for retrieval, and S for summarise and sequence. The Mayan creation story. At the beginning of time, that's a fronted adverbial. You may have noticed that if you've done the English lesson before your reading skills lesson. At the beginning of time, before the world had a true form. That just means before it was completely made and ready. There was no land or sky, no animals or plants. There was only silence and stillness all around, a complete void. Void means there's nothing there. Two Mayan gods saw that all around them was dark. Tipu, the creator, and Gukamats, the feathered spirit, with feathers of sparkling sapphire and emerald. They came together to create the world, their spirit and power giving energy to form the earth. Form just means make. Thoughts passed through their minds and they came into being. So this means that when they thought of something, it happened, it was created. When the gods thought of the earth, land slowly formed through darkness. They now had space to create life. They dreamt of mountains and valleys, seas and skies. All these things came to be the moment they thought of them. So you might have been listening to this story and thought, this sounds familiar, a bit like the Genesis story from the Bible, of our creation story. Similar sort of text, isn't it? But this is what the Mayan civilization believe. Huge trees were formed, their roots penetrating, that means going into, deep into the 9 levels of the Mayan underworld, and their branches reaching up to the 13 levels of the upper world. So the Mayan believed in an underworld, a bit like a hell, and an upper world, a bit like a heaven. Tipu and Gukamats decided they needed creatures to care for their new world and to praise their names as creators. So they created all of the animals, from the hopping frog to the stomping elephant, from the slithering snake to the soaring eagle. Every creature which filled the planet was created in an instance. So that's straight away. The two gods commanded that the creatures praised their name. Praise us! We are your creators! Praise our names! But all the animals could do in response, that means to answer back, was bark, howl, tweet or hiss. The creators tried as hard as they could to speak and praise the gods, but they just could not do it. They chirped and squawked at the top of their lungs until the sound was so deafening, it hurt their ears so much, that the gods demanded they stopped at once. They told them they had to stop at once. Disappointed, that means upset, with their creations, that means things they've made. The gods decided they needed to create an even better creature which would be able to worship them properly. They made a race of man from wet clay, and the gods gave them life. So a race of man just means like a group of people that all have the similar beliefs and from a similar area. The first men tried to speak, but instead they crumbled as soon as they tried. The gods knew they needed to make a stronger race of man if they were to survive. The second race of men were made from solid wood. These men were much stronger and were able to walk and talk, but these men had no minds of their own, and their hearts were empty. They had no memory of their creation. And when they spoke aloud, their words were empty and meaningless. They were still unable to praise the gods. So Tipu and Gukamat sent a great flood to destroy them all. Blimey! Not happy with their creation, they just sent a massive flood. The gods demanded that the animals attacked any remaining survivors. Gosh, it gets worse. So remaining survivors means the men that were left. But a few managed to escape and became monkeys. The creators let them be as an example to the future race of men. Be as an example to the future race of men basically means that the future men that they would create would see the monkeys and remember that the gods are all powerful, really. The gods thought long and hard about how they would make the race of men that would be perfect. Nothing seemed to work and no material seemed good enough. Eventually, some of the animals brought the gods a stack of white corn which grew on the far side of the earth. The gods ground this material into a paste, and from this formed 4 individual men. This new race of men seemed to be perfect. They were strong enough to last, and their minds were full of thoughts and feelings. After their creation, the men immediately, that means straight away, began to worship Tipu and Gukamat and thank them for their lives. This pleased the gods greatly. "What can you see?" the gods asked the corn men. "We can see forever. We can see through rocks, trees, rivers and mountains. We can see to the ends of the earth and beyond. We can see everything you have created, every plant and animal and tree. We see and understand all. Thank you." Wow, so they've gone from a man made of wood that knew nothing to a man made of corn, which the Mayans called maize. So from corn, maize, who can see everything. You'd think the gods would be happy now. Tipu and Gukamat were confused. "Oh, perhaps we made these creatures too perfect. They can see and understand even more than we do. This cannot be." Gosh, we can't get it right, can they? The creators decided to remove some of the men's vision. Vision means sight, what they can see. So they would only be able to see those things which were close to them. They were no longer able to see and understand as they once did. So Tipu and Gukamat decided that actually they weren't happy with the men they created out of the corn because they were too good. They were maybe worried that they wouldn't praise them. However, the men could still worship and praise their creators as intended. Intended means as planned. And they were able to settle down to a new life, feeling content. Content is another word for happy. Tipu and Gukamat then made 4 women to be companions. Companions means friends for the men. These special men and women were the ancestors, this means family, of all people today. Even today, man's sight and understanding of the world is not perfect. So this is the Mayan creation story that the Mayan people believe is how their earth was created. So today, like I said, you can either pause the screen or you can go onto Teams, look in the Files tab and download the questions from the PDF. You're going to be doing retrieval questions. Retrieval simply means that the answers are in the text. You just need to look for them and write them down. So you've got, what did the god Gukamat look like according to the text? How many levels of the Mayan underworld are mentioned in the story? What does the term worship mean in this context? Why were the gods unhappy with the second race of men? Can you think of another possible title for the text? So title, just the Mayan creation story. What else could this text be called? Okay, so 5 questions today. Pause the screen, have a go at them, and then I'll go through the answers. Okay, here's the answers for today's lesson. Also on Teams in the Files tab if you'd rather have them as a PDF. So what did the god Gukamat look like according to the text? He was a feathered spirit with sparkling green and blue feathers. How many, if you put emerald and sapphire feathers, you'd get a mark as well. How many levels of the Mayan underworld are mentioned in the story? There were 9. What does the term worship mean? It means believing in and praying to a god. Why were the gods unhappy with the second race of men? They had no minds of their own and their words were empty and meaningless. And can you think of another possible title for this text? This is a personal response. So as long as it's something to do with making the world and the fact that it's to do about Mayans, you can have a point there. Well done for completing today's questions. And hopefully I'll see you tomorrow for some more. Going to end the lesson today with a quote from Dr. Seuss that says, "The more that you read, the more things that you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you will go." Have a lovely day, Year 5. I'll see you tomorrow for tomorrow's reading skills lesson.